Welcome back to the County Chat previews of 2025. We are in the Division 2 section and we are going through the teams and previewing how they're looking for the 2025 season. We're up to Kent. Now this is slightly confusing because they weren't in Division 2 last year, so we've not moved up, but we have moved back, as Kent and Lancashire were the two teams relegated last year. So they'll be a part of the Season 2 preview rather than being a part of the Division 1 preview, if that makes any sense. I'm sure it kind of does. So Kent will be going first because they came lower down than Lancashire last year. They were very far from safety, to be honest. The Spitfires of Kent, I think Spitfires is also one of the best nicknames of any cricket team out there. It was an incredibly tough year for them. I think a simple way of putting it was that Division 1 chewed up and spat out Kent, and it ended with them having a measly 99 points. A symptom of how badly their season went could be that 4 of their losses were by an innings. In a 14-game season, to lose by an innings 4 times, I think is it's a tough accomplishment to kind of have to say you had as a team. I think it's safe to say, you're proof that your team isn't quite up to the standard of your opposition, and I think that would be perhaps a harsh way of saying what Kent looked like in Division 1, but I think last year it was a real struggle for them. They will keep the same team though, leadership group, if you will. Daniel Bell-Drummond, the sort of club stalwart, club legend at this point, will remain in the captaincy role alongside head coach Adam Hollyoake. I think I put here, it's difficult to assess any team that moves the division in sports. I think, especially in a sport like cricket, where you're sort of analysing statistics and trying to see where the struggles are and where the sort of strengths are, maybe. But again, it's difficult when you're weighing up Kent against Division 1 opposition and they're dropping down to Division 2, because it's quite hard to see how those bowling lineups, how those batting lineups will face up against the opposite, sort of not opposite, but the lower opposition or the higher opposition. So, for example, Sussex and Yorkshire will have very favourable statistics next year, like last year compared to next year, probably because they're the two teams going up from Division 2 into Division 1. Because I think it's having as bad of a season as Kent did, it's quite difficult to focus on what they did worse, really, because I think it's hard to see what they did worse. But I think again, it feels like every team I'm doing, but maybe it's just a case of the strength of your team is based on your bowling. I think again their bowling unit was their weakness, and I think it still is their weakness going into 2025. I've put in 2024 I think plainly Kent's bowling unit was not good enough to compete in Division 1. George Garrett was maybe the only bowler who served was only seam bowler who sort of served with distinction, and he actually only the only bowler really. He's played 9 games, took 21 wickets at 34, which is a very solid season for a young fast bowler. In a very struggling side, because I think with bowling statistics it's always difficult when your team is just getting battered. Your bowling statistics are always going to take a big drop in that sense. All-rounder Joey Everson was also a really a big standout for the team in both batting and bowling. He led the team in overs. He took 19 wickets at an average of 38. He didn't miss a game. Was sort of always available, always very solid. But again, a bowler who I think he's got better abilities than 19 wickets at 38 would suggest. Another bowler who kind of sparkled at a point of the season, he took Nathan Gilchrist, took 6 for 24 against Lancashire, but his stats ended being pretty unremarkable. He finished with 19 wickets at 42. Senior pro Matt Quinn will be looking to play a big role after missing the whole of 2024. His presence will be very important. I think his leadership and his sort of more established veteran role within this lineup will be important to really be a focal point. And I think he was a big miss for that season, where they just seem to have no real sort of give this person the ball and it will quell up an end, or put some pressure on. Everyone was going at economies well above 3.5, and no one could really stop the flow of runs where Kent were bowling, really. I think Bell-Drummond was struggling to really find anyone to hand the ball to where he confidently can leave it with them for 6 or 7 overs and be happy with. The bowling all-rounder Grant Stewart he's a very established player. He's an international now for Italy, but after last year he's a bowling all rounder, but his average last year with the ball with 91. They need to right the ship with their seam bowling unit to really be able to to compete, and not compete, because in Division 2 they will be able to compete. These bowlers will look a lot better, but I think they need, if they want to go for that, straight away back to promotion, relegation followed by promotion, which I guess every team does when they've just dropped out of Division 1, they'll need a real uptick in their seam bowling unit. And I think they've seen that issue, and they've attacked it straight away. Because to begin the season, they've got two seam bowlers in, Keith Dudgeon from South Africa and the Pakistani Kashif Ali. I mean, neither, I must admit, who I know much about. They've got, they're seasoned pros around the age of 30 who've taken, at least 100 wickets in their sort of domestic leagues. I'm sure their scouts know more than I do. I haven't seen much of footage of either of these bowlers. And I'm sure they would have they've brought them in for April and May, so I guess they'd have to assume they've got this kind of, the accuracy, the bowling full enough, the swing and seam abilities to take wickets in the early season. Both have averages sort of to the mid to high 20s of bowling, if you want to just go from the numbers part of it. But again, I'm sure the head of recruitment or the head coach or whoever was the people involved in trying to get these two across will hope they've sort of under the radar signings who maybe they didn't have to pay as much for as they might do other bowlers, but they might have the skills to take wickets early on and put Kent into a good spot to begin the season. After they go, they both only play until May. They'll have Wes Agar coming back for his third stint at the side. He plays from May to July, according to the sort of record at the moment. Again, all of these bowlers will be really important to lead the attack. I think Matt Quinn, as I said, is as a sort of senior pro, but there is a bit of a dearth in quality seam bowling in this Kent lineup. So I think they'll be really looking for those overseas pros to do a lot. Again, Wes Agar finishes in July, so whether or not they'll get another person in to supplement the end of the season remain to be seen. On the spin bowling side of it, it kind of begins and ends with Matt Parkinson. He's been a big part of some good teams in the past in the county championship. Matt Parkinson, the leggy, bowled more than double the overs of anyone else in 2024, but his bowling average was that of 47. He averaged 400. He bowled about 400 overs, I think. Again, these averages I think are bloated a little bit, and especially I think a spin bowler, because you think teams are racking up 400, 500 runs against your bowling lineup. You're going to probably rest your quicks and put your spinners on. And I think someone like Matt Parkinson had, not declaration bowling, that would be harsh, but it would almost be that level, because they weren't looking to take wickets. So his bowling average was definitely a bit inflated from that. But yeah, I'm sure Parkinson will want to return to his career best form. He struggled a little bit basically since he was selected for England, and kind of to use the phrase again, chewed up and spat out by the England setup, and he kind of didn't really make his way in it, and he kind of hasn't returned to that form since. But I'm sure he'll hope that in Division 2 he'll kind of be able to get back to that kind of big leg break spinning and keeping, the kind of art of leg spin, which is such a beautiful thing to watch when it's at full flow, which Matt Parkinson very much has. Batting all-rounders Marcus O'Riordan and Jack Leaning will hope they can prove effective with the ball in hand, but both averaged near or over 100 with the ball in hand last year. Young Jaden Denley, the nephew of Joe Denley, a pretty similar player, will probably hope to bowl a few more overs of spin this year, having had brief spells of opportunity in 2024. Onto the batting lineup, and again, I feel like I'm saying a similar thing in a lot of these teams. It's plenty good enough this 2024. The Kent team is plenty good enough for 2025, having had a struggle in 2024. They just need to have a player or two to really stand up and have a big season. Last year they all kind of finished around their sort of 800 to 600 run range, which isn't bad. And again, it's just more indicative of where the side was at. The averages were all in the low to mid 30s, and I think they just weren't in positions to win games a lot of the time. Because I think if you looked at name by name in this batting lineup, I think they are real talent. Ben Compton was a big shout for England a few years ago, and he hasn't changed much. He hasn't, he's only 33, and he averages high 40s in first class cricket over quite a prolonged period of time. And again, in a bad season for Kent, he scored 833 runs. Nothing to sort of disrespect in if you were to use a word like that. At the top of the order, it will either be Zach Crawley, the England opener. I think it's a lot of people will know about Zach Crawley. There's not much to say about him. He sort of feasts or famines. And last year in the county championship, he very much was exactly that. He he had 10 innings for Kent for 322 runs, which was almost spot on to his career averages. But it was all in one innings. He scored 238 in a second innings where the Kent had to follow on against Somerset, and he scored 238 in a heavy loss for Kent. But it just shows Crawley's ability to sort of, against the odds, can sometimes pull out an innings which is just truly spectacular. I mean, yeah, we all know what Crawley's like, but that also means in the rest of his innings, at 9 innings, he scored less than 90 runs. I mean, that's also kind of crazy for someone of Crawley's standards. So it's a funny thing with Crawley, and he obviously won't play that often because he is a very established member of that England lineup. You won't see much of him, but he is a hell of a player when he's at full flow. But speaking of players who are very good and when they're at full flow, Dewanda Miye is the other obvious opener. I played against him as a schoolboy, Dewanda Miye, when he was at Eastbourne, another Sussex sort of school, and I've never been so certain of all the people I've played who've become professionals as when I played against Miye that he would be successful as a professional. He was just brilliant back then. He won, the Wisden School Cricketer of the Year, and yeah, when he's at his best, it is just poetry in motion for cricket fans. I mean, he has just the most aesthetically pleasing cricket shots. His 211 at New Road last year was one of the easiest of the eyes innings of any like division or any team or any player. He just, he never looks like giving away a chance when he's at that kind of that level, and he can score at a real rate. He only played in 9 games last year, and he moved around the lineup a lot. So I'm hoping whether or not they'll just settle him in lower down the order, or whether it will just be the case of they will just back him to open the innings and maybe move Crawley to 3, which he's done in the past, or when he's available for selection. Because again, Crawley's not going to be there for the most of the season, so whether or not Kent should really stick with Compton and Moye at the top of the lineup remains to be seen, and I'm sure they'll be thinking about all of this as we go on. But yeah, the sort of, as I say that I would say the strength of this lineup and the strength of, I guess, most batting lineups is their sort of 3-4-5. Daniel Bell-Drummond bats at 3 usually, but I think he could slide down at 4 to fit in Crawley when he's available anyway. But so yeah, Bell-Drummond usually at 3, Jack Leaning usually at 4, and Joan Denley at 5. They all had, again, as I said at the top of this batting preview, if you will, they all had solid years last year. None of them looked like they were sort of over the hill. I mean, Joe Denley's getting up there in age, but none of them looked, scored 100 still and looked good. But I'd say all of them, if you think about it, as seasoned pros who've played in Division 1 for a while, will probably look at season in Division 2 and be like, licking their lips and seeing if they can get a big year, because none of them, got close to that 1,000 run mark, and I think there'll be at least one of them will probably go over that this year, and it'll be a bit of a sort of case of who will be the one to do it. Marcus O'Riordan, as I mentioned, that the bowling lineup, he'll be looking to put pressure on them. He played a few games last year, maybe slide into that 6th spot a bit, or sneak into that top 5 if one of the, maybe a Joe Denley does look a bit, like he's getting over the hill and he's going towards nearer and nearer to 40. But again, I don't think that will be the case. I think someone like Joe Denley is more than good enough to have a really good season in Division 2 in 2025. Yeah, Harry Finch will continue with the gloves, I think, for Kent. I think, he's always been, as long as I've followed first-class cricket, he's always been tipped for a big season, Harry Finch. He was a Sussex player for a very long time, and apparently, he would always score buckets of runs in the second 11, but struggle when he got to the first 11, and he still has an average in the 20s, which, again, for any cricketer, for a batter, is not great. He's got all the talent to really move up that batting average, and I think he will do. And again, I think another year with a very settled team around him, maybe that will help. He's got the ability to be that wicketkeeper batsman to really score them the runs. But having said that, if that doesn't happen, Kent did make one big signing this year. They didn't make many, they just made one, and it was Chris Benjamin. He's one of the early stars of the 100. I remember when he was at university at Durham, he was scoring runs in the 100, and it was a big deal, and he did great. He struggled to consistently play at Warwickshire, which I guess is the case for any Division 1 side, after scoring 100 on debut for Warwickshire. But yeah, he has like many others, really focused on his wicket-keeping and being able to do so for white ball cricket especially, and has done a lot of that in the second 11. So whether or not, if Finch does struggle, Chris Benjamin could fit into that wicket-keeper batsman role at the sort of sixth slot for Kent. I think he's more than good enough to do so, and I think Finch also is a sort of batter turned wicket-keeper. So I think either one of them, if they needed to just fill in at their kind of specialist batter, would be very happy in doing so. And as the aforementioned all-rounder, Joey Everson, I mean, he had a brilliant all-round season last year. He had a really good season with the bat, particularly. He scored 750 runs at an average of 37. I mean, exceptional numbers for someone who's consistently batting at 7, really, and below. His ability to bowl and bat, I think, is a really high level. And I think he'll have a really dominant season going into 2025, to be honest. As I mentioned, Jaden Denley, who's got a bit of a option with the ball, but he's going to have more of his talent for the England under-19s, and Kent's twos has been mostly with the bat in hand. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll be able to break into the lineup in 2025. Overall, I believe Kent are in a really strong position, having been soundly relegated in 2024. I think the batting unit is more than good enough to dominate in Division 2, and they're top 7, maybe withstanding Kent, withstanding Middlesex, and maybe Lancashire are as good as it really gets in Division 2. And it will be interesting to see if players like Murray and Finch can really have some big seasons to establish themselves in this Kent side. And if not, someone like Chris Benjamin can slide in there. They have maybe the superb all-rounder in Division 2 in Joey Everson. And again, as I said, I think the bowling lineup is their limiting factor. I think it will just be a case of if they'll be able to win enough games to go back up. I doubt they will. I don't know if they can. I think Middlesex are a better unit than them. And to preview the next preview, I think Lancashire might have a little bit more than them in the tank. I just think there's too many ifs for that bowling team. I think there's a little bit, some overseas signings you've never done it in England, and all of these sort of things. As well as sort of young bowlers who haven't had big seasons behind them, and more senior pros who are returning from injury. Anyway, to finish off with the usual predicted lineup, I think it's going to be Compton and Mieye for the most of the season. Bell, Drummond, Leaning and Denley, as I mentioned. I think it will start with Harry Finch, but I think Chris Benjamin is very possibly going to be able to sneak into that lineup at 6 and wicket keeping. Joey Everson at 7, with Keith Sturgeon and Matt Quinn at 8 and 9. Kashif Ali will also sneak in at round 10 with Matt Parkinson at 11. Again, obviously, Wes Agar will take over for one of those bowling spots when he comes in in May. And again, the sort of younger bowlers will have to find their way to replace Ali or Dudgeon going forward in the season. So yeah, that's the roundup for Kent. There's only one more in the Division 2, and then we'll be on to the Division 1 roundup. So thank you very much for watching. This has been the County Chat, and stay tuned for less Lancashire's season preview.